Welcome to another episode of GQ Speaks, your go-to platform for insightful conversations, captivating stories, and thought-provoking discussions. GQ is a series of experiences, and we're just making sense of that as we go along. That is what we're doing here, one conversation at a time. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into our episode.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another GQ Speaks episode. I'm Kaltham, your host for today. I'm a senior at GQ and I'm majoring in culture and politics, and joining us today is Dr. Maryam Alsada.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Bayyan Qunebi.
Hi, thank you for having us.
And Nafissa Sagdullaeva.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, in today's episode, we will be discussing a program here at GQ called Women as Changemakers. It takes a group of female students in GQ to Washington, D.C. for a week, and the trip is centered around empowering women and includes educational tours of women's history landmarks, meetings with accomplished women, and much more. And just for some background information, all of the students' expenses are paid, such as the flights, accommodation, the tours, and the meals. And it is typically held during fall or spring break. So to start, I think a lot of our listeners will benefit from learning about the application process. So how about we talk about our own experiences with the application and any tips we have for getting accepted?
I can start off with that question. I personally think that the most important thing which you have to consider when applying for any trips here at Georgetown is being honest and owning your voice and owning your story. And then everything just comes naturally, and you can include it. And application, I personally had a very personal experience, which I included in my application. I was talking about growing as a woman in Central Asia, and I believe that's what made it stronger. Putting that personal link and talking about your personal experiences will make it stronger.
As far as I remember, the question focused on someone that inspired you or like sharing your own narrative. I remember talking about my mom, so that's also a very personal story. I shared her journey as like being a woman living in Saudi Arabia and a lot of the amount of things that she had achieved. And you know, when I sit with her and talk about it, she would inspire me a lot. So it was very encouraging to apply to this trip and get accepted.
Yeah, I'll talk about mine and then we can head to Dr. Maryam. So for me, I definitely agree with both of you guys. I think you need to make it personal and vulnerable. They need to see a side of you that shows that you've dealt with some things and you've been a change maker in your own way. And it doesn't have to be something grand or crazy, but just being authentic goes a long way. So for Dr. Maryam Alsada, how was the design of the course for you, and what aspects were you involved in? What aspects did you enjoy?
So this is the first time that I was involved in this trip, but it is the second rendition of the trip. And my engagement was specific to creating intercultural connections. So this is something that I spoke to Dr. Christine Shivitz about when I first joined the leadership team. And we spoke about how important it is to have conversations within this community about, you know, evaluating our positionality in the academic world. So just to take you a step back, I'm involved with something called the Engelhardt Faculty Fellowship. And this is a fellowship that is awarded to faculty members who incorporate understandings of mental health in their course design. And the idea behind it is to normalize conversations about mental health and wellness by including them not just, you know, on campus, but in the classwork as well. I've done this for 2 years in a row. The first year was because I teach freshmen. The first year was about stress management. So I included a lot of tips about stress management, a lot of, you know, help for students about how to read academic content, how to write, how to, you know, all of these little things that you're expected to do once you enter university, but nobody really explains it to you. So for example, once you enter university and somebody assigns you a 200-page book, when you're a freshman, you read all the words in the 200 pages. But when you're a senior, you read the introduction, you read the conclusion, you skim the chapters, you zoom in on the things you're more interested in or you think are more relevant. You kind of look very quickly at the things that are not as important to what specifically you're studying. So these are life skills or academic life skills that you gain along the way. So I wanted to, spell it out for the freshmen. The second time I did this faculty fellowship was a very specific and different topic. I focused on decolonizing our academic experiences. The majority of the students on the Doha campus are people of color, but this isn't true for what we read. And I really wanted people to connect, students to connect to what they're reading. And I wanted students to be able to say, I don't agree with what this author is saying about my community or my culture or my religion. And I have more of an authority to speak about it. It sounds basic, but nobody ever tells you that. So it's a struggle, or for me, it was a struggle to come to that point to say, you know what, I don't agree with what this person says about the Middle East because that person doesn't know what I know. So I spoke to Dr. Shivitz about this entire process first, and she invited me to join the trip. So we created this intercultural connections component, which, if you guys remember, on the last day of the trip, we spoke about relating everything we learned to our own experiences and our own cultures and kind of evaluating, do these different understandings of feminism, these different understandings of what it means to be a leader, what it means to be a change maker, what does that mean to me and where I'm from?
Yeah, that's interesting. I definitely think that was something that we've kind of experienced in GQ with our diversity, but it was way more concentrated in that trip. It was just women, and every single person was from a different background, and we got to bond over these things. And I distinctly remember that conversation and how every single person had a different idea of what a change maker is from their own context. So moving on, what do you think was essential when you were preparing for the trip? Whether that is like mentally preparing or like actual items that you brought, needed, didn't need. I know when we were going, it was spring, but technically in Georgia, it was like really, really cold. So yeah, how does everyone feel?
To be honest, when you asked whether it's mentally or physical preparation, I was more preparing physically because mentally, at that time, I remember it was the midterms week. We had a lot of midterms going on, and I had so many midterms back to back that I literally remember the day before the flight, one of the women that traveled with us, she came up to me and she was like, "Hey, so are you ready for tomorrow? We're traveling tomorrow." And when it hit me, the realization hit me that, oh my God, we're actually traveling tomorrow. Because I feel like at that time, some of my peers as well, we were busy and occupied mentally with midterms and everything else happening on campus. But physically, I definitely looked at the itinerary. Of course, I looked at the packing list, and I remember I was in Egypt a few weeks before I traveled. So I was running with my mom looking for the coat to buy a coat because there was never necessity to wear a coat in Doha, right? So definitely packing list and looking at the itinerary. So like the places that we're going to be visiting in DC. And how does the place look? I personally like getting excited by just looking at the photos and, predicting how the place would look before actually visiting the place.
I've had a very similar experience because I remember it was during midterms. I was stressed out, and I remember packing a day prior the flight, and I remember telling my mom that I needed a lot of things, but I didn't end up getting what I wanted, so I stuck to what I had. I had a few puffer jackets. I just, whatever I had, I packed up, and then I was kind of stressed that I was gonna freeze there, but it wasn't as cold as I expected. It was kind of fine. We had sunny, slightly sunny days, and
I mean, we had one mornings where it was like below zero.
So, yeah, but inside the hotel, it was fine.
As the warnings were. I think.
Yeah. And mentally, I don't remember exactly how I was feeling, but I was really excited. Yeah, it was my first time to go to DC, so I was really excited to explore, and especially when it's just a women's trip. I felt like that was like, I feel like it relieved a lot of stress for me.
Yeah.
Like, it was so nice. I was like, I'm going to be
Did you guys
comfortable
feel
24/7 for sure.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the questions I was going to ask.
In DC, safe?
Maybe safe in a different sense that you're with women.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that made it way better. But like, if we're talking about safety in DC, I feel like personally it was fine. It was safe.
I know
But-
I was panicking and
Yeah,
paranoid
Kaltham
the whole
was
time.
the whole time.
My only concern before was I was worried about safety. And
Mhm.
there's this kind of paradox where you're just women in a group and you're like, is it safe to
As
be
just women.
as just women? But also at the same time, you feel a different kind of safety because it's just
Exactly.
women.
Exactly.
But I was specifically concerned about Islamophobia. So I remember
Mhm.
speaking to my friend and being like, listen, I'm a hijabi. Is it going to be fine? And some people said, just be careful. But this girl was like, it's completely fine. And when we went there, like the second we got to the airport, there were Muslim women everywhere.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
there was
that
a
made me
lot.
feel,
It was
you know,
unexpected.
yeah,
There's
I
also
wasn't
this
expecting it.
cafe owned by local, like I think it was
Like
the Arabs, yeah.
Yeah.
And when we went into there, we were like, oh my God, there's a lot of Arabs. And I was
Yeah.
There's a
telling
big
her,
Arab
that's so
community,
weird. She was
yeah.
like, actually, this cafe is owned by an Arab person. That's why.
Yeah.
Middle Eastern, I think it was, yeah.
I think definitely for me, I was super excited because it was my first time going to DC. It was my first time traveling with just women. But I did a lot of mental preparation of like, okay, we got to manage our expectations, especially
Yeah.
because I knew it was going to be a long flight. There was a good chance that we were going to be in economy. And so I had to do like physical preparation of like, okay, I got my pillows, I got my everything.
She was so
She was
prepared.
ready, yeah.
Yeah,
prepared.
because it can be physically tolling, especially since the next day we had to wake up pretty early.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then definitely knowing the schedule, knowing when to pack formal outfits and like casual outfits, that was really important because I know they stress that a lot. So yeah, I was also gonna ask, how was it your first time visiting DC? If it was your first time, what were your first impressions? And if it wasn't, do you feel like your perspective changed now that you came back with a women's only group?
I can answer that question. Actually, as a first timer in DC, I was more curious to learn more about the culture and people.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my intention. And after landing, I remember it was so rainy on that day. After landing in rainy DC, I realized that by just looking around myself and like when we were all coming from the plane in a bus, you know, going to the airport, I remember looking around and I was like, wait, it has a very international community.
Mm-hmm.
Like DC on its own, even the area where we stayed,
Mm-hmm.
around the hotel, like you mentioned, yes, one of the restaurants was owned by the Arabs. So like around you, you realize that it has a very international community. So that was something which was unexpected and which I enjoyed seeing. But also after being picked up from the airport by our tour guide, and while we were driving from Virginia to DC, of course, I was exploring the area. I was literally staring at the window, and I remember that I felt like I was immersed in one of those Hollywood movies. Why? Because one thing that indicates a different cultures, in my opinion, it's the way houses are built.
Mm-hmm.
And by just looking at the houses and the neighborhoods, you know, they were just structured and built differently. So I felt like I was just in one of those, you know, I was seeing one of those typical American households. Almost like you ended up outside Kevin's house, you know? So definitely the international community and also just a different culture, you know? You're seeing people just run on a Saturday morning even.
Yeah.
That's so different and, you know, indicates the healthy lifestyle in DC. I personally enjoyed the trip and it was my first time being in DC.
Also, the parallel of like the architecture from Virginia to DC was
Definitely.
insane. Like
Yeah.
when we entered DC, it felt like I was in a small town
Yeah.
that's like straight out of a movie. It was gorgeous.
Yeah.
I also like our tour guide, Caitlin. She gave us like she kind of told us about how the architecture was completely different. I think she said there was like a lot of tall buildings in Virginia, whereas in
Yeah.
DC it was more like a
There was a
smaller
law
area.
that the
Smaller.
buildings couldn't
Yeah.
go higher.
But I feel like
than
I liked
certain.
DC more than Virginia,
I
I
did
think,
too.
because it was more alive.
Mhm.
And we would wake up in the morning, go grab bagels really quickly and walk. And it felt so normal because everyone else was doing it at the same
Yeah.
time at the very morning. So it's like, okay, guys, we're not. This is normal. Everyone's alive at the very morning, grabbing their coffee, going to uni, you know.
We're not
So-
usually up
Yeah.
at that time
We're
of
not
day.
here.
And also,
so,
you don't
but it was
really
always
notice
different.
that you don't live in a walkable community
Oh,
until
yeah.
you go to one, and then
Yes.
you're like, okay, this is what a normal life is supposed to be
Yeah,
like.
commuting by walking or we
Actually,
barely even
yeah.
took the bus. We enjoyed walking. It was so
Yeah.
nice.
It
Yeah.
encouraged me, and I remember me and Kulzina and Masha, we would walk. And at the end
Yeah.
of the day, when we would look at the number of steps that we
20,000
took,
steps.
it would be thousands
Yeah.
of tens of
Yeah.
thousands of steps. And I would be like, wait, so I can walk, I have feet, you know?
Dr. Maryam, do you have any input for your expectations?
So it was my first time in DC, and I'm realizing now I think it was everybody's
Yes.
first time. So I was excited to see DC, but I was also excited to see the Georgetown campus.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. So I didn't really have expectations. I just kind of went into this blind, but I really enjoyed the experience, and I loved seeing, as you mentioned, like the very international community. I also appreciated there was a lot of mention, like posters, stickers, everything about Palestine, which I
Palestine.
loved.
Yeah, that was. I didn't expect that to be
I
there.
didn't
didn't
expect
either.
it either, and it
Yeah.
made me feel that was something that made
It
me
was
feel
so nice.
safe.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was nice to see and nice to know that a lot of voices from our region are heard elsewhere.
I think
think
because
this
it's very polarized, you kind
Yeah.
of are worried that anything that happens or anything that's Muslim related would be like used against you. Because I had that same fear of like, oh, maybe my hijab will be like,
Yeah,
you know.
targeted for your hijab.
But for me, I expected it to be way more boring than it actually was. Like every time I spoke to someone about DC,
People say it's boring a lot, and
everyone's like,
it's
it's just museums and like.
I
Yeah.
think it
You know?
depends on your mentality and what you want to do.
But
Yeah.
also,
you can
honestly,
make it
I
boring
didn't
if
have
you-
time
It
to
was
go
so
to any
much
museums.
fun.
That I had a list of museums I wanted
Yeah.
to go to, and we didn't even have time for that because we were just busy all day.
We were hustling.
Yeah, but honestly, like, although I've been to the States, it was one of the best ones that I've ever visited, and I
Yeah.
loved it so much
Yeah.
because it was just so rich, and you could, like, every time I talked to someone that actually lived in DC, they were like, no, it's the best. Like,
They
there's
love it,
always
yeah.
something going on. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's so exciting. So I think that was definitely something that you have to experience yourself to realize how great of a city it is.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think this trip is also a nice introduction to DC and to the Georgetown main campus for female students who want to, go explore.
study abroad.
Yeah.
We're going.
Oh, you
Yeah.
are?
Are you not?
For summer?
I'm
Bayyan
going
is-
next semester, hopefully.
exciting.
Yeah.
And
So this
also,
was like
I've
a
never
background.
gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my way of like
You're a senior as
experiencing
well,
study
right?
abroad
Yeah,
before I
yeah.
left. So I think that's a good
But
part
I'm
of these
kinda, like,
trips.
right now with everything going on, I have a bad feeling. But
No,
The
I think
fellas
you'll be
are fine,
fine.
yeah.
Yeah.
I want to join the protest.
But these trips are such a good chance to like visit a place if you don't want to do a full semester
Yeah.
and
yeah,
commit.
it's such a good opportunity.
Yeah. I think this goes for everyone, but how was it traveling with faculty for the first time? I mean, like, I know you're not a student, but
Yeah.
it was also your first time traveling
Yeah.
with them.
It was.
So how was your experience with that? I feel like it's an interesting
Can I
and
ask
new
you guys
dynamic.
something? Were you all friends before you came on the trip? Because
No,
when
not
I
really.
walked into the
No.
airport, I felt like all of you guys were so close.
We weren't.
And then I realized maybe they're just forming this friendship now.
No, I actually got close with people from my batch, and I barely talked to them or interacted with them before. Like, no offense, but me and Bayyan, we barely talked before. But
Are
then
you guys
I was
in the
like,
same batch?
we
yeah, we are in the same
Okay.
batch, or
But I don't
even
think we've taken courses together or like had an opportunity.
exactly.
To,
So I
actually
feel like
talk.
it was a good opportunity for us
Yeah.
all to bond together, but also even across the batches.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I'll be honest with you, because a lot of the people also, all the stereotypes about, especially the Qatari students having their own group. But I'm so sorry, but me and the 3 Qatari girls that went on this trip, I had the best experiences with them. You guys truly made the trip. So all the stereotypes, I literally came back, to campus, and I was like, oh, these are all lies. Yeah, I was like, I love the Qataris. No, really, you guys are the most friendliest and the sweetest people, actually. Like,
But that's the thing. Like, you need to actually experience.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So this was a
Instead
good
of judging.
opportunity. So I feel like people make up those things. People just spread the rumors, stereotypes, saying, oh, they're unapproachable, etc.
Honestly, I feel like all you guys are so busy with work, you don't have time to hang out usually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Could
also,
be.
Qataris are just generally more reserved, I
Yeah.
think. I that's what I've noticed. Because even like I remember with the World Cup, people were like, "Why are they like not moving? Like they're
Yeah.
just sitting down in their chairs, like being so formal." But that's just how we are.
Especially, I will miss the moment when Hint was taking care of all of us.
Oh.
Every time she would be just asking, "Hey guys, are you okay? Are
Do
you
you want
okay?
hand sanitizer?
Do you want hand sanitizer? Do you want drink? Do you want water? Are you sure? Do you want my?" At some point, she literally just got me her coat, and she's like, "Here, wear my
Aw.
coat." I'm like, "You're the sweetest."
Yeah, that was good.
I feel like in the beginning it was a bit weird seeing
Intimidating.
Dinfishevitz with us on the trip, but they're literally like the sweetest ever.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
remember seeing this other side to them when Dinfishevitz would be like, "Come on guys, today we're gonna be hustling, we're gonna be running, we're gonna be," and I was just like, yeah, like I'm so excited. So I feel like I had a chance to see the other side of everyone. It's the fun side because here we're all stressed out and we're all in our like private situations and we're just
Yeah.
trying to get stuff done, but the opportunity to like see everyone free and like trying to have
Chill,
fun,
yeah.
excited, and also the times where we opened up to each other. It was really nice. Yeah.
I think it was all of our first times meeting you,
Yeah.
Dr. Maryam.
Yeah, it
so that was
was.
Yeah.
interesting.
'Cause
And it was the
I
best
had
way to meet
only-
you, honestly.
It was so much fun because
Yeah.
I had only taught for 2 semesters and I didn't have any of you guys
Yeah.
in my classes.
I remember emailing you and like spamming you with so many emails saying, "Please."
Honestly, people who
please.
email me before classes and are like, "Are you gonna teach?" or "I want to like a spot in your class." If we don't meet, I don't know who you are
Really?
based on just your name.
So I've been emailing, and I remember the very first thing, if you remember, that I saw you, and I was like, "I am that girl who spammed you so many times," because the amount of times I emailed her trying to get into her course, because I heard so many good things about you. So I was like, I said that as a goal. I was like, by the time I graduate, I'll definitely take one of her history courses, and I want to have that experience with her.
I wish I had that chance.
Exactly, and the number of times I spammed, I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. I enjoy those emails.
But definitely, as Bayyan said, it's very interesting to see the other side because I feel like when the faculty and staff are on campus, people are, in a way, they have the titles like the dean,
Yeah.
professor, right? So in that sense, it puts so many boundaries between you as a student and them. But then when you're outside in a trip, outside these walls, there is no sense of title. There is no. It's more like we're all here with the same goal, trying to, have fun, but also help each other out. And it was a really good experience, in my opinion.
I loved the moments when we would just be in the bus, like singing all
Yeah.
together, and
The
like,
Egyptian music.
is like recording us, like singing along.
Yeah.
And also the in your shoes experience, I think that definitely brought out a different side of everyone.
Yeah.
And it's scary being vulnerable in front of like students, but especially like faculty and staff. But seeing like a different side to everyone and like having like a group therapy session was just
I was so proud of
incredible.
everyone that day because it's really difficult, like you said, to be
It's so
vulnerable
hard.
in front of
Yeah.
strangers. And everybody did it, and people spoke from their hearts, and everybody treated who was speaking with respect.
Yeah.
Nobody felt, as far as I could tell, uncomfortable with what was happening.
I think it was just something outside of our control. It's like
it just happened.
yeah.
I didn't expect myself to be in that position, and then I found out that I was.
I don't think there
so-
was a dry eye in the house. Like it was crazy. I've never experienced something like that. So I think that's a bonus of this trip is like genuinely, unless you go on it, you'll never experience something like that. It's
What
very
stays in
interesting.
DC? Stays in
What
DC.
happens in
What
DC
happens in DC
stays in
stays in
DC.
DC. It's like, what is it called? Yeah.
Okay, this is off like the curriculum, but like what was a highlight of the trip for you, or what was your favorite moment or thing that you did?
Oh my God, definitely in your shoes.
Yeah.
That activity, I feel like there was no single person that did not cry on that
Oh
day.
my god.
I feel like it was also good timing in the sense that
Not
why
too
did we
early,
trust?
not
Yeah,
too
not
late.
too early and not too late. So in a sense that we had enough days to create bonds and also bond with each other, but also create a trust. You know,
Agreed.
Hence why I think, answering your question, Maryam, I think because of that, people felt, they felt like they can trust each other and share their personal stories. Especially the moment when I remember Dean Shivitz from one side, the other side, I think Maria was there. I remember we were holding each other's hands very tight and
And we
crying
were
in a circle. We were
You
shaking.
guys,
And
people who are listening to this podcast have no idea what you're talking about.
okay, so let's give a context. In Your Shoes was basically the activity where we had to talk about the change maker and what does the term change mean to all of us. And of
Yeah.
course, that's when everyone stepped in and put their personal stories into it. That's when everyone was sharing their personal stories. And I was working with Professor Maryam, and her and I were partnered up together. We were sharing our personal stories.
Yeah.
And the aim was that I had to share Professor Maryam's story from her perspective, you know, in her tone, in her body, to the rest of the group. And I think that's what made it very powerful, because you were trying to step into other person's
Yeah.
shoes
Exactly.
and share their glimpse of a story.
Yeah.
I think that's like one way to bond that I've never experienced before. And in my 4 years of being in university, I don't think I ever had that kind of bond with anyone. Like, just like genuinely feeling for someone and, like, you know, everyone crying together. That's so unique. And I think we all came in sort of like skeptical. Like, what is this stupid exercise that we're doing?
It started off with silly
Yeah.
exercises. as well.
Yeah.
Like it was
But
light
it's
at
just
the
like
beginning.
putting your
I
guard
want to
down.
know the psychology behind it, because how did we all suddenly started off like that and then ended up being vulnerable and we're all like crying?
Yeah.
But like you said, it was very genuine. Like us shaking and us crying and holding each other's hands so tight at the end of the activity. It was so genuine. And that just shows how powerful the activity itself was. That's why it's, in my opinion, that is the highlight of the
It was
whole
the
trip.
highlight of the trip for me as well. And I think another reason why it was the highlight was because it really showed me a different way of learning. So, like you said, you've never bonded with anybody in that way during your university experience. But how many books have you read that talk about like a catastrophe that happens around the world, right?
Yeah.
And you'll read it, you'll read the numbers, you'll read the number of people who've passed away or have been hurt or have been displaced.
And
But
you
it's
move
different
on.
to feel it, to recognize that this is a person.
Yeah.
And then when you recognize this is a person, the tens or hundreds of thousands of people, it hurts more.
Yeah.
And it's important not to let go of that feeling.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So what about you? What was your favorite part of the trip?
I wouldn't say I have a specific highlight, but I would also agree with what they said, because I think that activity actually gave me the opportunity as a Palestinian with everything happening right now. I had like the chance to narrate my personal experience as an outsider, even though I do wish to be there with my family. So that was a very peak point for me. And I think that also, as mentioned earlier, we've seen a lot of awareness on what's been going on, and that was really nice to see. I think it was very unexpected, but every time we would go anywhere, it would say like "Free Palestine, Free Gaza," and I would just be like people are actually feeling what I'm feeling right now. So yeah.
Also, for me, I feel like this is something we didn't talk about, but having a roommate, I mean, Bayyan was my roommate. It was my first time ever having a roommate or sharing a room with someone for a long time. That was also another way to bond with someone, because it's such an interesting dynamic. You meet someone that you've probably never talked to before from very different countries.
Your roommates just randomly allocated
Yeah,
to you?
yeah.
Oh,
It was through a mutual.
Yeah, but like some people were randomly assigned. You know, everyone has different habits and stuff, so having that dynamic to navigate throughout the trip was interesting,
Yeah.
because everyone's like different sides of their personalities come out. And I think mostly, I don't want to speak for everyone, we all had good roommates.
Yeah.
And we're like bonded for life now.
And I was rooming actually with Maheen.
Oh.
And the way we just compromise on each other, because you mentioned an important thing, you raised an important point. Everyone has different personalities. But then it's also such a long time. It was also my first time sharing my space with someone for such a long time. So then how do you communicate? How do you compromise?
Yeah.
And how do you set the boundaries, but also have fun and enjoy the week? I personally loved the experience of sharing my
Yeah, me too.
and having a roommate, because like you said, it was also a good way to bond.
So, yeah, I think we can wrap it up now. If anyone has like any final reflections, anything you want to say.
I've had the best coffee in DC.
Where?
Blank Street.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I
that was my
love the
favorite.
weather. I love it so much. And the cherry blossoms were like
They had
highlight.
started to bloom at
Yeah.
that point.
Also, we learned a lot about historical and cultural contexts. We visited memorials.
Yeah.
We should probably talk more about
Okay, what was your like peak historical memorial or
I think
fact
Abraham
that you
Lincoln's
learned?
memorial.
Mm-hmm.
That was
Oh,
very
that was our
interesting.
first 0.5 picture moment.
Oh
Yeah.
my
That was
god,
like-
I miss it so much.
Yeah, we had 0.5 pictures in every place. It was so nice.
Literally,
Nafissa.
that was the cutest moment
Yeah.
ever.
Oh
Like,
my
we
God.
would just shout 0.5 and everyone would just gather.
See, it's another way to bond. Like, who would have expected that?
Yeah, exactly. Just as a last point, because you said what are the highlights, right? I also missed the ramen soup shop. I'm so
I wish I
sorry.
had gone.
With the cold weather, I remember that was the highlight of my every single evening, afternoon. We would just run to the ramen shop with my friends and we would just be drinking that soup every day. It would just felt so good.
Oh,
I miss
wow.
it.
Oh my god. I remember our favorite thing we ate. I loved
Tacos.
tacos. It's called tacos and tequila, and it was
No tequila, just tacos.
we made it halal, don't worry. But it was in Virginia actually. It was right behind the mall that we visited, and it was really good. But I also loved what was it? Seed and grain something that
Sweet
we went.
greens.
No, it was
Oh.
the one we went that was
The one
it used to
in,
be something else.
Yeah.
Virtue, feed and grain.
I
That's
think
what
so,
it was
yeah,
The
called.
one we all went to.
Yeah,
Yes,
the one we went
it
to
was
together, yeah.
amazing. So yeah, to wrap it up, I think I would just like to thank everyone that like made this trip possible. I think we can all say with confidence that every single aspect of this trip was designed so well and it made it so successful, and I'm just so thankful for this and for everyone. So yeah, thank you.
So time for the last 0.5.
Do you want to do it now?
Actually,
do
yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of GQ Speaks. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspirations from our conversation today. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to follow us on our Instagram page at GQ_speaks and be sure to leave a review on Spotify to show your support.